What happens when Hollywood's most lovable goofball meets late night's biggest ego? You're about to witness one of the most shocking celebrity confrontations ever captured on live television. Jack Black, the high-energy star of School of Us, rock and one half of Tenacious D, walked onto the set of Jimmy Kimmel Live, expecting laughs, light-hearted banter, and maybe a few questions about his latest project. Instead, he found himself at the center of a calculated takedown, ambushed by a host seemingly hell-bent on making him the punchline. By the end of this interview, security would be summoned, the cameras would cut to black, and one of Hollywood's most beloved personalities would be escorted off set, not for misconduct, but to escape a situation that had spiraled completely out of control. Make sure you subscribe and drop a comment below, because this one is wild. The trouble starts early. From the moment Jack walked on stage, something felt off. There was no warm embrace, no big build-up. Jimmy barely looked up from his cue cards as Jack approached, offering a limp handshake instead of the usual enthusiastic welcome most A-list guests receive. "Jack Black, everyone," Jimmy said, his tone flat and robotic. The crowd cheered, but something about the moment felt forced. Jack, ever the professional, laughed it off, flashed his signature grin, and took his seat. But what came next caught everyone off guard. The first blow. "So, Jack," Jimmy said, settling into his chair with a sharp tone, "when exactly did you decide that being loud and obnoxious was a replacement for actual talent?" The audience fell into a stunned silence. Was this a joke? A roast gone wrong? Or something far more deliberate? Jack let out a nervous chuckle. "Wow, Jimmy. Starting strong tonight. I guess I've been loud since I was 12. The talent came later. You'd have to ask the fans about that." But Jimmy wasn't letting up. "Oh, your fans? Tell me. Are they mostly children who don't know any better? Or just adults who never grew up?" The crowd began to shift uncomfortably. This wasn't playful ribbing. It was personal. Even Jimmy's band leader looked like he wanted to vanish behind his keyboard. Jack fires back. Jack's expression tightened. The easygoing rock star energy faded. "Look, Jimmy, I don't know what's going on with you tonight, but if I've done something to upset you, we can talk about it like adults, off camera. Ambushing me like this, that's not cool." Jimmy waved him off. "Ambush? Jack, this is what interviews are. If you can't handle basic questions about your career, maybe don't do press." "Basic?" Jack snapped back. "You just asked. If my fans are idiots, that's not journalism. That's a cheap shot." Jimmy leaned in with a smug smile. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Your whole shtick is being the funny fat guy who screams. How long did you think that could last?" The breaking point. That's when it shifted. Jack's smile disappeared for good. "You know what, Jimmy?" he said, voice steady, eyes locked. "I've spent my life entertaining people, bringing joy, working my ass off in an industry that eats people alive. I've stayed true to who I am, and I've done it without tearing others down just to get a laugh." The crowd erupted, half in support, half in confusion. Jimmy opened his mouth to respond, but Jack was already rising from his seat. "I'm done," Jack said simply. "This isn't an interview. It's a hit job, and I'm not going to be your punching bag." Security, already moving after a frantic signal from the producers, slowed as Jack raised a hand. "No need. I'm walking out on my own." "Aftermath." Jimmy called after him, voice cracking. "Fine. Walk away. Just like every washed-up hack does." Jack paused at the edge of the stage, turned and delivered the final blow. "Jimmy, I've been called loud. I've been called weird. I've even been called annoying. But no one, and I mean no one, has ever called me a coward. Until now. Congratulations." With that, Jack Black walked off the set, leaving unmasked Jimmy Kimmel behind. A silent audience and cameras that captured every second of one of the most uncomfortable moments in late-night history. "For years I've come on this show with nothing but respect," Jack said, his voice steady but firm. "I've sat in that chair more times than I can count. I've promoted my films, joined in on your sketches, and always tried to be a good guest. So I'm going to ask you, honestly and respectfully, what's really going on tonight, Jimmy?" Jimmy leaned back, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "What's going on is that I'm tired of pretending," he said, the edge in his voice no longer subtle. "People like you have made entertainment into a circus. You get roles not because you're the best actor, but because it's funny to watch you play the clown. You make music not because you're a musician, but because people think it's amusing watching you pretend to be a rock star." The studio fell into an uneasy hush. Even the crew behind the cameras hesitated. Jack's expression hardened. He sat up straight, gripping the arms of his chair. "A clown?" Jack repeated quietly. "Jimmy, I've spent over 2 decades working in this industry. I've taken roles that made people laugh, cry, and think. I've done voice work that's brought joy to millions of kids. And yes, I'm loud, I'm over the top. That's my style. But it's not without substance." Jimmy didn't flinch. "You confuse noise with talent. Being weird isn't the same as being good. Real entertainers know the difference." Jack let out a slow breath. "Real entertainers?" he echoed, his voice tinged with disbelief. "You mean talk show hosts who read pre-written jokes off cue cards and toss softball questions to celebrities selling a new product? If that's real entertainment, then forgive me for not measuring up," the crowd murmured. Unsure whether to laugh or wince, Jack pressed on. "At least I don't make my living mocking other people from behind a desk," he said. "I put myself out, there. I take risks. I've built a career making people feel something. Can you say the same, Jimmy?" Jimmy's jaw clenched. "At least I don't rely on fat jokes and kid-friendly antics to get by," he snapped. "I have to be clever?" "Clever?" Jack's tone was incredulous. "You call it clever to read, mean tweets and make political jokes written by your team of writers? When was the last time you said something original that didn't rely on tearing someone else down?" The tension in the studio reached a breaking point. Jimmy looked rattled. The usual late-night polish had cracked, revealing something raw beneath. Jack, meanwhile, remained composed. But there was no mistaking the fire in his eyes. "You think because people laugh at me, they don't respect me," Jack said quietly. "But let me ask you something. Do you respect anyone who's different? From you? Or just the people who wear suits and play it safe?" Jimmy tried to regain control, forcing a tight smile. "Look, Jack, maybe we're getting a little off topic. Let's talk about your new movie." "No," Jack interrupted, shaking his head. "You don't get to drag me for 10 minutes and then pivot like this is a normal interview. You started. This, Jimmy. Let's finish it." He stood up, towering slightly over the seated host. The entire room seemed to shift. "You want to know what real comedy looks like?" Jack continued. "It's not about cruelty disguised as cleverness. It's about joy. It's about connection. It's about giving people a reason to smile when they need it most. That's what I do. That's what I've always done." Jimmy remained silent. Jack looked down at him, not with anger now, but with a kind of quiet disappointment. You think the suit and the desk make you more legitimate than the guy on stage? You're wrong. What makes someone real in this business is heart, and I've got that in spades." With that, Jack stepped back, nodding once toward the stunned audience, and walked calmly off the set. The cameras cut to black, but the moment would be replayed and remembered for years to come. Jimmy's voice tightened with restrained frustration. "Jack, you're making a scene." Jack chuckled, but this time there was real amusement behind it. A scene. "Jimmy, you set the tone for this the moment I walked out here. You turned this into a spectacle. I'm just following your lead. Don't be surprised if I end up being the main attraction." The cameras continued rolling, capturing every second of the unexpected and intense exchange. Jimmy's producers waved urgently from behind the scenes, but both men were locked in now, focused solely on each other. "You want to know the real difference between us, Jimmy?" Jack said, pacing slightly in front of the desk. "When I'm on screen, people are laughing with me. When you're on screen, too often they're laughing at someone you've torn down. I try to bring people joy. You tear them apart." Jimmy stood up from behind his desk, trying to reassert control as host of his own show. "You bring noise, Jack," he shot back. "That's all you do. You're loud, over the top, and you think that's the same as having talent." "There it is again," Jack said, gesturing calmly. "Loud and over the top. You keep saying that like it's a character flaw. You know what actually is a flaw? When a host, someone in your position, feels the need to put others down to feel in control of their own show. They were now eye to eye, the studio charged with tension. Neither was backing down, and the audience sat frozen, unsure whether they were witnessing legendary unscripted television or a moment both men would regret. "You act like you're above everyone else," Jack continued, "because you've got the desk, the writers, the network. But underneath it all, you're just a guy with a mic who uses it to take cheap shots." Jimmy's composure cracked slightly. "And you're a has-been clinging to relevance," he replied sharply. "Your best work was 2 decades ago, Jack. You've been riding nostalgia ever since." Jack's expression flickered with pain for a brief moment before the steel returned to his voice. "Has been," he echoed. "I'm still out here making films, making music, making people happy. What are you making, Jimmy? Besides cynicism and applause lines at someone else's expense." "I make television," Jimmy snapped. "Real television, not cartoon voices and slapstick for 8-year-olds. "Cartoon nonsense?" Jack repeated, his tone icy. "You mean the movies that bring in families, that connect with kids, that people remember fondly? The music that gets stuck in their heads for years?" "That nonsense," Jimmy's voice raised, now tinged with desperation. "Box office doesn't mean quality. McDonald's sells 1 billion burgers. That doesn't make them fine dining." Jack's eyebrows raised in disbelief. "You just compared my work to McDonald's? Really? So everyone who enjoys what I do, they're just uninformed? Or worse, dumb? Is that what you're saying?" The confrontation had gone far beyond the scheduled segment. Producers frantically signaled for a cut, but the moment was too far gone. Jimmy and Jack were locked in a battle that neither could or would walk away from. Jimmy's voice lowered, but his words cut sharper. "You built a career being the class clown, Jack. The rest of us grew up." That stung. The air changed. Jack stood very still for a beat, letting the words settle. Then, quietly but with purpose, he spoke. "Grew up?" he said, his voice calm but fierce. Jimmy, you've confused cruelty for maturity. You think making fun of people is somehow a sign of sophistication? That being mean-spirited is the same as being clever. That's not growing up. That's becoming the very thing this industry needs less of. Jimmy opened his mouth to reply, but Jack raised a hand. No, he said clearly. I'm not done. The audience leaned in, sensing something powerful coming. You want to know what growing up really looks like? It's using your platform to lift people up instead of tearing them down. It's understanding that even if something's not for you, that doesn't make it worthless. It's recognizing that making people laugh, without hurting someone, is not a weakness. It's a gift. The room was silent. Even Jimmy, momentarily, had nothing to say. I came here tonight, Jack continued, to share some joy, to talk about projects I care about, and instead I got ambushed by someone who thinks being cruel is the same thing as being funny. Well, let me be clear. You're not funny, Jimmy. You're just mean. Jimmy's face contorted, the mask of the charming host slipping completely. You know what? He said, voice trembling with anger. You're right. I'm not funny. But at least I'm not pathetic. At least I don't have to wear silly costumes and make goofy voices just to be noticed. Jack stared at him. Then slowly, deliberately, he responded. Do you hear yourself right now? You're mocking me. For making people smile. For bringing joy to children. You're treating all this like it's some zero-sum game. Like if people enjoy my work, that somehow invalidates yours. This isn't about success, Jimmy snapped. This is about dignity, about self-respect. Jack's tone turned incredulous. Self-respect? You spend night after night reading mean tweets about people, mocking them, dragging them for a laugh. And you want to lecture me about self-respect? The studio was frozen. Phones were out. No one dared move. At least when I mock people, I own it, Jimmy said loudly, trying to match Jack's force. Jack didn't flinch. Yeah, he said softly. You own it, and you've built an empire on it. But don't confuse owning something with being proud of it. Jack didn't pretend to be wholesome, not even for a second. I don't pretend to be some family entertainer while I'm doing it, he said. He laughed, but there was no joy in it. Wholesome? Jimmy, there's nothing wholesome about what I do. I'm a rock and roll guy who happens to make family movies. I swear like a sailor. I drink beer. I play loud music. But you know what I don't do? I don't use my platform to hurt people. I don't punch down. I don't make people feel small just so I can feel big. Jimmy was trembling with rage now. You think you're so much better than everyone else, don't you? You think because you make people laugh you're some kind of saint. I don't think I'm a saint, Jack replied, voice calm though his eyes burned. I think I'm a guy who tries to make people happy for a living. And I think you're a guy who makes people miserable for a living. Which one of us do you think is contributing more to the world? That question cracked something in Jimmy. His face flushed red, then purple, and when he shouted, it echoed through the studio. Contribute to the world. Jack, you're a joke. A fat, loud, obnoxious joke. The only reason anyone pays attention to you is because you humiliate yourself for money. A collective gasp rippled through the studio. Some audience members stood, stunned by the cruelty of Jimmy's words. Jack, in contrast, went perfectly still. When he finally spoke, his voice dropped to a near whisper. There it is. There's who you really are, Jimmy. The guy who thinks tearing people down makes him important. The guy who thinks being cruel is the same as being clever. Jimmy flinched, realizing he may have gone too far. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. "I'm being honest, Jack. Someone needs to tell you the truth." "The truth?" Jack's voice rose, louder now but steady. "You want the truth, Jimmy? I've spent my career trying to make people smile. I've made movies families watch together. I've made music that makes people feel good. I've used every opportunity I've had to spread joy. You've done the exact opposite." Jack stepped closer, commanding the space now. "You sit here every night and tear people down. You mock their appearances, their choices, their failures. You've turned cruelty into an art form and convinced yourself that makes you sophisticated." "I'm a comedian," Jimmy said, but even he didn't sound like he believed it anymore. "No," Jack shot back. "You're a bully. Comedians make people laugh. Bullies make people hurt. And you, Jimmy Kimmel, are the biggest bully on television." The studio was dead silent. Even the cameras kept rolling, capturing every breathless second. Jimmy's face had gone pale. He looked lost for words. Jack, on the other hand, wasn't finished. "You know what the saddest part is? You could have been better than this. You had the platform, the audience, the opportunity to make a difference, and instead, you chose to be small. You chose to be petty. You chose to be mean." "Get out!" Jimmy snapped, voice cracking. "Just get out of here." Jack blinked. "What?" "I said get out," Jimmy screamed. "This is my show, and I'm telling you to leave." Jack stood there looking at him with something that might have been disappointment. "You know what, Jimmy? I will leave, but not because you told me to. I'll leave because I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to be part of whatever this is." He turned to the audience, addressing them with clarity and calm. "I'm sorry you had to see this. I came here to have some fun, to talk about projects I'm excited about, to maybe make you laugh. Instead, you gotta see what happens when someone decides that being cruel is more important than being kind." Jimmy was waving desperately to his producers now, and within seconds, security guards appeared from the wings. "Escort him out," Jimmy ordered, his voice shaking. Jack looked at the guards and let out a real laugh this time. "You're having me escorted out? This is incredible. You attack me for 20 minutes, and when I defend myself, you throw me out like I'm the problem? You are the problem," Jimmy snapped. "You came on my show and disrupted everything." "Disrupted everything?" Jack's voice rose. "Jimmy, you started this. The moment I sat down, you turned it into a bloodbath. All I did was refuse to take your abuse lying down." The guards were clearly uncomfortable but moved to flank Jack. He nodded to them. "It's okay, guys. I'll leave, but not because I have to. Because I want to." He turned back to Jimmy one last time. "You know what? I actually feel sorry for you. I feel sorry that you've become so bitter, so angry, so small, that you think attacking people makes you important. I feel sorry you've forgotten what it's like to create joy instead of pain." Jack started toward the exit, then paused and turned again. "And I feel sorry for everyone who works on this show, because they have to show up every day knowing their boss thinks cruelty is comedy." "Just go!" Jimmy shouted, his voice completely unraveling. "Get out of here!" Jack smiled. A real smile. The first genuine expression of joy he'd shown since the whole mess began. "Gladly, Jimmy. Gladly." He walked off the set, security trailing behind him, leaving the studio in stunned silence. Jimmy stood behind his desk, breathing heavily, looking like he'd just survived a war. The cameras were still rolling. The audience remained frozen, unsure whether to clap or quietly leave Jimmy's producers scrambled behind the scenes, trying to salvage the segment. But the damage was done. In 25 minutes, Jimmy Kimmel had revealed himself to be everything Jack accused him of being. And Jack Black had revealed himself to be far more than the jolly clown people assumed he was. As the studio lights dimmed and the cameras finally stopped, one thing was clear. This was a night television would never forget. So what do you think? Was Jack Black justified in standing his ground? Or should he have taken the high road and walked away? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one.